As we end our program, we're leaving you with a sneak peek and listen of a Broadway-bound show. It's called Rock and Roll, the First 5,000 Years. Promises to be a look at rock's greatest, from Chuck Berry to the Beatles to Devo, among others.
As Sue says, as we say goodnight, we leave you with this preview. Thank you for having us in for news.
Good night. Nice weekend.
But the fact remains, I love rock and roll. Well, now comes Rock and Roll, the First 5,000 Years. And it is a multimedia record of, you got it, the history of rock and roll. Everything from Rock Around the Clock and Great Balls of Fire to Shaboom. That's one of my all-time romantic favorites. Down to it, including Concrete Shoes and Jocko Homo. And an unbelievably talented collection of performers plays all the instruments, sings all the songs, and impersonates everyone from Chuck Berry and Bob Dylan to Mick Jagger and Devo. And here, Little Richard. The good news. The bad news is that this show soon gets unbearably messy with all that mixed media messing around. Scrims drop down, blotting out those talented performers who are stuck like sandwich filling between the scrim and more images being flashed on split screens behind them. A newsreel was run, for example, over musicians playing The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down, while old Civil War sketches flashed behind them. Later on, a film of a kid on a skateboard was played over James Brown, while scenes of a moon rover were projected behind all that. You figure it out. Because of all that, this show is so hyper it is incoherent. I couldn't see enough, I could hear too much, and finally my circuits not only overloaded, but they blew, just like my temper. Cheers to a great cast, though, to the hair and the costume people. Great hair. But phooey on Joe Layton and everybody else responsible for this rocky horror show. Rock and roll might be here to stay, I hope it is, but I hope the same is not true for this show. Roll it over, Beethoven.
I liked it, Katie.
So you went and enjoyed it, right?
Yes, I did.
Well, it was your first night out in a week. You've been sick, Sue. Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back.
Okay.
I like rock and roll, too, but I haven't seen the show yet.
In case you thought you missed the first 4,900 years or so, he'll explain the title.
I'll do my best, Ron. Rock and Roll, the First 5,000 Years, gets its title because of the music it's most about, rock and roll, and because in the beginning it tries to make some terribly tortured connection between rock and evolution, ancient Greece, the Renaissance, etc., etc. Actually, it's just a device, the title, a failed device announcing an evening of devices, about, I'd say, 93% of which are failed. Using music, lyrics, slides, films, front and rear projections, Rock and Roll, the First 5,000 Years is a multimedia event, which in this case means it's boring in more ways than one. The songs by themselves, from Little Richard to The Police, are just dandy, even if they are only and remain mere imitations. So an evening of old song imitations is itself no help. The special effects are erratically effective, not much more help, but those involved have tried to add grand significance to songs which, by their very nature, are not significant. They're nice, they're pleasant, they make for memory, but they are not terribly significant. Marrying these songs to the senior prom of the hula hoop is one thing, But the show gets downright offensive when it marries the songs to such brutal events as the assassination of Anwar Sadat. And in those parts, and in that sense, the show is downright arrogant, trying to make great import of what is finally a most ambitious K-Tel record offer. And at the top price of $35 a seat, no bargain at that. So they're sending out an SOS. I feel most sorry for the many cast members because even though they are live, they don't seem to be. Everything is just so overpoweringly artificial. I suppose it shouldn't be too surprising to note that in this era of imitation margarine and lemonade without lemons, we have a musical non-dairy creamer. Carol.
In a Broadway season where musicals are giving us something different for our money, two shows have come along that are banking on the familiar. Rock and Roll, the First 5,000 Years, recreates the world's most famous rock and roll music, and Lennon is an off-Broadway tribute to singer and composer John Lennon. Although rock and roll music isn't new to Broadway, most shows have only used it stylistically. Beatlemania was the first to focus on actual performers, setting a precedent that made over $30 million. The music of Lennon and Rock and Roll, the First 5,000 Years, had passed the test of time, but recreating it for an audience is a tricky business. People want authenticity, but at the same time, they don't want to see second-rate imitations. And nobody knows that better than the performers up on stage.
In the show, I play Elton John. Usually there's a little bit of pressure because you've got to figure out how is my voice pitched and what vowels you worked on and stuff. Plus, you're always in the back of your mind, you don't want to make it seem like it's making a comment on the person. You want to get it as true to the person as possible.
The two people I'm portraying, Chubby Checker and Jackie Wilson, you know, it was quite a challenge for me, and I wanted to do them justice as well as do myself the justice by getting myself over there.
What the producers of these shows are counting on is a strong interest in nostalgia. Dick Clark, the associate producer of Rock and Roll, the First 5,000 Years, believes that there is.
You obviously know that being America's oldest living teenager, I've lived through all the rock and roll stuff. So when you combine them all, we should have an audience of people 12 to 90 involved in this thing, because it'll be everything that ever happened to you happening again before your eyes.
Nostalgia alone can't keep a show running. Although Lennon opened just a few weeks ago, business has been so poor we may see it close very soon. But here at Rock and Roll, the First 5,000 Years, the producers hope they've mastered the same formula that made Beatlemania such a huge success. I'm Barbara Hauer for Entertainment Tonight.